And we are live streaming. So welcome back to the public hearings of the Environment and Transportation Committee. I am Kumar Barve, the chair. And with me is Dana Stein, the vice chair, and increasingly more and more members of my committee. So the order is going to be as follows. Bill 703 and 705, sponsored by Delegate Ivy, will go first. House Bill 63, sponsored by Delegate Williams, will go third. And then House Bill 67 and 334, both by Delegate Corman, will follow. So with that, Delegate Ivy, you have 4 minutes, 2 and 2, as Chuck Woolery used to say on
Awesome. Thank you, Mr. Chair. We'll be brief. This is not a new issue. Of course, individuals have been following the Beltway expansion proposal for quite some time now. And we do have significant authority here as the General Assembly to be able to allow or to prevent those from going forward. So colleagues, for the record, Delegate Julian Ivy here presenting House Bill 703. I'd like to thank the members of the committee for all the work that you've been doing. House Bill 703 prohibits Maryland State Highway Administration from adding any new lanes to I-270 and to I-495. Members of this committee are well aware of the traffic congestion issue that we have here in the DC metropolitan region. It's a major concern for Maryland's commuters. We're also well aware that Maryland's mass public transit infrastructure is in dire need of upgrading and funding. And if we're ever really going to tackle the issue of traffic congestion in the region, we're going to have to do it in this manner. Dedicating state resources to lane expansion projects is a regressive approach to solving traffic congestion in the region. Adding more cars to our roads is just not the solution here. Ensuring that our state is fully committed to investing in mass transit projects is the right way to go for both Maryland's transportation infrastructure and our environment. We should not allow SHA to approve lane expansion projects that only worsen Maryland's environmental and transportation crises. Colleagues, for these reasons, I ask for a favorable report on House Bill 703. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, for the record, Delegate Julian Ivy here presenting House Bill 705. This bill prohibits the MTA or any private entity participating in a public-private partnership from imposing a toll lane for the use of I-495.
Hold on, Julian. For some reason, I was muted. Are there any questions for Delegate Ivy?
Silence made me think I should continue on, sir.
No, it was just a glitch on our side. Okay, I was going to say lots of people have signed up for and against the bill, so please read their testimony. And with that, Delegate Ivy, you have the floor for House Bill 705.
Thank you very much. Again, House Bill 705 prohibits MTA or any private entity participating in a public-private partnership from imposing a toll for use on I-495 and on I-270. Toll lanes are not the solution to Maryland's many transportation problems. Luxury toll lanes operated by private companies are a burden on the taxpayer dollar, since these projects would rely heavily on subsidies from the state. Toll lanes are also prohibitively expensive for low-income drivers, only further widening our economic inequality in our state. Instead of dedicating state resources to toll lane projects, we should be fully committed to investing in our mass transit infrastructure. So I ask for a favorable report on House Bill 705.
And thank you very much, Delegate. And once again, lots of people have submitted written testimony for and against, and I would ask you to all read that testimony. But are there any questions for Delegate Ivy before I let him take off? If not, thank you very much, Delegate Ivy. And we will proceed to House Bill 63. Delegate Williams, are you in the House? I don't see you yet. Delegate Williams?
We didn't see him in the waiting room yet.
She.
It's a she.
Regardless, they're not here.
Well, in that case, we're going to go to House Bill 334, Delegate Corman. No, wait a minute, hold on. I'm sorry, Delegate Corman, House Bill 67. I'm sorry.
Mr. Chairman, Delegate Williams is here now.
Oh, really? Okay, in that case, we'll take Delegate Williams. Delegate Williams?
She's connecting to audio.
Okay. Oh.
Okay, she's there now.
Okay, Delegate Williams, House Bill 63, you have 4 minutes.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Chairman and members of the Environment and Transportation Committee, as well as members of the Appropriations Committee. I am Delegate Williams. I'm testifying in favor of House Bill 63. I know you all are familiar with the transportation needs of our state, as well as stewards of our taxes that our constituents pay. We strive to ensure that the funds that we appropriate reflect our highest priorities as a state. The COVID-19 crisis of 2020 has drastically altered the way that we need to look at our spending as a state, and we need to get our priorities in order. Utilizing state money for the maglev train, sorry, my thing went out. Okay, maglev train cannot be a priority when there are small businesses closing and families struggling because of the current financial crisis. So I'm here today to talk to you about the maglev project. Opponents of my bill state that the Central Japanese Railway Company is providing the funding for the construction of this project. And it's not my intent to say that they can or cannot construct this project. My intent with this bill is to simply state that our tax dollars cannot go to funding this project. You may hear people say that this is a NIMBY reaction, but this cannot be a NIMBY reaction when you have residents in multiple legislative districts throughout the state of Maryland, in fact, almost 1/3 of the entire state, expressing concerns about this project. If the Northeast Maglev wishes to show that they're truly concerned about the communities in which this project will impact, then they should stand with me in support of this legislation. However, instead, they wish to ignore the concerns of the communities impacted by this project and want to keep the option of coming back to the state for funding that they have repeatedly stated that they do not need. We need to reevaluate our spending priorities. And if the opponents of this bill truly believe that the Japanese government will fund this project, then there is no need for state appropriations. Instead, we need to focus on ensuring that we have the funds to educate our children, help our struggling citizens, and not funding an idea that doesn't even have the necessary approvals along the entire Northeast corridor to come to full fruition to alleviate traffic up and down I-95. I request that this committee pass a favorable report for House Bill 63.
Okay, thank you very much. We have a number of people who've signed up in favor of the bill. Susan McCutcheon, Emmett Jordan, Takesha James, Dave Glaros. Well, those are the 4. So why don't I take them in that order? First, Susan McCutcheon.
I'm having a job interview right now, if you don't mind.
Excuse me.
Is that okay? Oh, I heard someone else talking. I'm sorry. Okay now?
Susan, you're up. 2 minutes.
Thank
Susan,
you.
You're up.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Barbe and members of the Environment and Transportation Committee. My name is Susan McCutcheon, and I live in Bladensburg, Maryland. I am in support of this bill. Northeast Maglev indicated at a hearing about this bill in a previous iteration that it had unintended consequences because it would inadvertently tie their hands to work with the appropriate state personnel to acquire permits or other required approvals should the project go forward. The exception provided in the current bill should now make it acceptable to BWRR and Northeast Maglev, as they repeatedly state they are a private company and will not need to seek state funds in any case. Major construction projects costs ordinarily are underestimated. It is the nature of the beast. Examples are the work stoppage and cost overruns of the Purple Line and the continuing saga of the California Bullet Train project as their construction and financial woes continue to mount. The SC maglev will undoubtedly face financial difficulties as the projected costs increase exponentially and the actual work is undertaken. As a result, the ability of BWRR to either continue or complete the project will be curtailed. BWRR and its partners will seek additional funds from bank loans as well as from the Maryland and federal governments. Government funds are taxpayer dollars we, the people, will pay and already have from a chunk of federal government funds allocated to undertake the study and meet NEPA requirements. The Japanese government will invest as a partner in the SC maglev project. Their technology and expertise will anchor its construction and operation. They will own a piece of Maryland's Northeast Corridor and demand repayment should the project falter or perhaps not be able to be finished. They and all interested parties will expect to be repaid for their investments in building and operating the train. Again, we, the people, will pay to complete a foundering project. Thank you for this opportunity to provide oral testimony. I look forward to HB 63 moving forward.
Thank you very much. Next up, Emmett Jordan. Emmett?
Yeah, good afternoon. My name is Emmett Jordan. I'm Mayor Pro Tem of the City of Greenbelt, and I come before you today to speak in support of House Bill 63. When Greenbelt was founded in 1937 as a New Deal experiment in land use planning.
Hey, we need to put the timer on, folks. Go ahead.
It was intended to serve as an affordable suburban refuge for working people just outside of Washington, D.C. Over the years, Greenbelt was divided up by highways, State Route 193 and 210, Interstate 495, and the Baltimore-Washington Parkway. The question that I have for you today is, how much should Maryland residents pay to subsidize a private infrastructure project? How much will a project like the BWRR maglev cost? And what public resources will be required if the project moves forward? Well, let me answer that question by looking at a few of the project impacts. Interference with important short and long-term research at NASA Goddard Space Flight Center, the Beltsville Agricultural Research Center, the Patuxent Wildlife Research Center. Compromised national security at Fort Meade, the National Security Agency, BWI Airport, and other federal agencies. Permanent damage to Chesapeake Bay critical areas near Baltimore and to old growth forest and sensitive wetlands near the Patuxent River and the Patapsco Aquifer. Temporary and permanent property value loss and damaged structural integrity at hundreds of homes, apartment developments, schools, and churches. The photo behind me is the Greenbelt Observatory located in our municipal forest preserve. It was purchased by Greenbelt a quarter century ago to protect the land in its natural state. This area could be destroyed if the maglev project moves forward. So the price tag for this disruption, destruction, and denigration of local land use authority is incalculable. Incalculable, but far too much to pay for a project that clearly will not reduce traffic congestion and potentially cut available resources.
You could wrap up your testimony. The committee
like
would
our MARC
appreciate it.
trains, Amtrak, the Baltimore Light Rail, WMATA, and roadways. So
You could wrap up your testimony. The committee would appreciate it.
How much taxpayer money are you willing to risk?
Sir, would you please wrap up your testimony?
Okay, and I say the resources are beyond taxpayer funding is already too high if this project goes forward. On behalf of the Greenbelt City Council, I ask for your support of House Bill 63. Hey, I am an elected official and I believe I'm entitled to 3 minutes, but thank you for your attention.
No, you're entitled to 4 minutes and no, you're entitled to 2 minutes. I'm giving 4 minutes to sponsors and 2 minutes to everybody else. And that's what I've had in my committee because of these restrictions. So I apologize to you, sir.
Yeah,
Okay,
thank you
next,
so much for your
Keisha
attention.
James.
Thank you.
Yes, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the opportunity to testify before you all today. I am Keisha James, Mayor for the town of Bladensburg, here to testify in support of HB 63. As elected officials, we have a responsibility to protect our residents, their homes, schools, places of worship, businesses, national park land and waterfront parks in our local communities. All of these assets and their delicate ecosystems found in our communities must be protected against projects that ignore their importance to the prosperity and quality of life for our Maryland residents. The proposed SC maglev train project places all of these assets in jeopardy and also puts taxpayers at risk of being financially responsible for the project should it prove economically unviable for the developer. For the sake of comparison, the California bullet train began with an estimated cost of $6 billion, but as of 2020, those costs escalated over $80 billion. And we have similar concerns with the project proposed for our great state of Maryland. I'm especially concerned about the financial uncertainty this project inherently brings to bear and the concern that it's not recession proof. As we've experienced and as Delegate Williams stated before, we've learned about financial challenges in light of COVID-19 pandemic, and those concerns also are at the forefront of our residents as we think about the economic viability of this project. And so again, I'm here to applaud Delegate Williams for seeking to codify protection for Marylanders to ensure we are not left with the bill for the project at any time now or in the future. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Next, we'll hear from Danielle Glaros. Danielle Glaros, 2 minutes. Welcome back to the committee.
Thank you, Chairman Barvey, for having me back. And thank you. Actually, let me let you reset the time. Thank you, Chairman Barvey, for having me back. Thank you, Delegate Williams, for putting forward this important legislation that we have in front of us today. It's pretty clear that it does protect our taxpayers and the dollars. I am honored to be here on behalf of my residents who will be dramatically impacted by the maglev project. But putting that aside for the moment, let's talk about the 32% of MARC riders that will be predicted to be siphoned off for the maglev project. Why would we be investing our state dollars in a project that would be a privately owned project that would be siphoning off our riders from a state investment, the MARC commuter rail project? At the end of the day, the data in the draft environmental impact statement clearly indicates the prices for this. This is not going to be mass transit for the majority of the public. The costs and peak fare would be as high as $79. That is in the draft environmental impact statement. So clearly this is about providing transportation opportunities for those who are most at wealth and not really providing opportunities for the state as a whole. I really urge you to support this bill. I will also just leave you with one other fact. I think as the state invests its dollars, it needs to make sure that is ensuring equity, and it needs to make sure that it is lifting up our communities and creating strong local economies. This bill will devastate the Riverdale neighborhood. I want you to imagine 590, 690 trucks a day, 24 hours a day in your neighborhood where there's apartments and single family homes, and ask the question, does the state want to put its dollars into this project? I think the answer is no. It is not a good investment of taxpayer dollars. I urge you to strongly approve this bill of your committee. Thank you, Chairman Barvey, and thank you, committee members.
Thank you. Are there any, that is the sponsor and all the witnesses in favor. Any questions for the sponsor or any of these witnesses? Delegate Lewis.
Thank you, Chair Barvey, and I thank the sponsor for bringing forth this critically important bill. It's good to see the council member as well and many of the advocates. I have a couple quick questions. One, you stated how much will a ride cost for the maglev if it was to connect from Baltimore to Washington, D.C. Each way? How much would a ride cost?
Sure.
Oh, go ahead, Councilwoman.
Oh, no, Delegate Williams, please.
I was just going to say, I think the estimates are somewhere around $75 to $80 one way for just one trip between Washington, D.C. to Baltimore.
And if someone was to currently take either, Amtrak or MARC from Baltimore to D.C., how much would it cost? Do you know?
About $6 one way.
So I would imagine, would you use the term that this would be a commuter rail for everyday Marylanders then?
Oh no, this is definitely not commuter rail transit. Just the cost alone, like I said, the MARC train is roughly about $6 one way for an individual between DC and Baltimore. And we have seen pre-COVID, just a large number of individuals that would take the commuter train to get to and fro work. This train would not be affordable for many of the commuters going back and forth between Baltimore and DC to work. And so while the proponents of the construction of this project state that it would take a number of vehicles off of the roads, actually, I don't think that they're factoring in the cost of the tickets would be unaffordable for most of those commuters. And then two, we are seeing post-COVID, and there has been articles and studies that are in the works and have been published recently that even once we come out of this pandemic, the use for people to be commuting back and forth will probably be dramatically decreased. We're seeing large companies such as Twitter and Amazon and other corporations basically stating to their workforce that even post-pandemic, they're going to be a lot more flexible in terms of allowing their workforce to work from home. And so therefore the need for such a project is actually going to be greatly diminished once we come out of this pandemic, because a lot of employers are really going to be modifying their work practices to allow individuals to work from home and things of that nature. So I think for those reasons alone, this project is going to have some problems actually surviving and getting the ridership that it is actually estimating.
Mr. Chair, can I ask one follow-up question? I'll be done, I promise you. The question is, there's in some of the testimony I saw, it was stating that they believe a number of the current commuter riders will transition from Amtrak or MARC over to the maglev. Do you have an idea of how much the cost differential may be? Like, will the state have to subsidize that, or just any idea you have? I saw that was referenced there. I just want to know, were there any numbers for us to reference?
Yeah, I think the proponents of the project are not, they're claiming they won't need a subsidy from the state in order to achieve their goals of that 35% of the ridership. And so, but on the flip side of it, we know MTA is funded by our state. And so therefore, what we will also see is a decrease in revenue to MTA because of what they are estimating, because that's just dollars that they're no longer going to receive by that decrease in ridership. And I don't know if the councilwoman has anything she wants to add to that or not.
What I think I'd like to do is move on to Delegate Healey's question, because we have a deadline of being on the floor at 3 o'clock, and I kind of want to be able to move through as quickly as I can, get to as many of my members as I can. So Delegate Healey, you have a question?
Absolutely, Chairman.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to make sure that I welcomed not only my colleague, Delegate Williams from my district, but also our mutual constituents, the Mayor Pro Tem from Greenbelt, Emmett Jordan, and Council Member Glaros, who represents 80% of our district on the county council. And we cover a lot of the same territory. We hear from a lot of the same people about these concerns. But my question is, Delegate Williams, has anybody said that they actually see a need for any state money for this project? Or are we just trying to put into statute what the proponents have already claimed?
We're just trying to put into statute what the proponents of this project have already claimed. As was stated in the testimony earlier, we introduced this bill last session, and the proponents expressed a concern about the original version of this bill, precluding them from being able to work collaboratively with MDOT. We have since added language to the bill that will allow them to continue to work collaboratively with MDOT. So therefore, that concern should no longer exist, given the exception that we have now added to the bill.
It sounds like a very reasonable bill. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Delegate Embry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Delegate Williams, thank you for bringing this bill forward. And I think you kind of already answered my question. My question was going to be on the workforce shift and how working from home is going to change the commuter status for many residents. Just hope that you can, what is there guaranteed research that will give us more proven numbers? Is more so the question I want to know. And like, do we have exact numbers? And if you don't have it now, just ask that once we have it available, that it be made available to the committee as soon as possible.
Yeah, we don't have the exact numbers available about kind of what the potential ridership will look like post-COVID, but obviously once we have that information, we'll definitely be willing to provide that. Unfortunately, it was not in the DEIS that was actually released a few weeks ago, and so I don't know if the proponents of this project are going to amend the DEIS to include that type of information. I think that would be extremely important for folks to be able to provide accurate comments to the DEIS that's going to go forward to the Federal Railroad Administration. And I would like to hope and think that the Federal Railroad Administration, when they're reviewing the DEIS and preparing the final EIS, will ask those same questions.
Yeah, and I feel as though based on the ridership fee that you've expressed, it sounds like based on that fee, I would assume that would even be a larger group of people that probably have jobs where they're able to telecommute. So I look forward to seeing that.
That is correct.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Yeah, we've seen during.
Next is Delegate Parrott. Delegate Parrott.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question has to do with ridership too. I wonder if we're considering that ridership could increase with people relocating when they come to the DC area to Baltimore. If you look at the current cost of the average townhouse in DC costs $752,000, and the average regular home in Baltimore costs $114,000. Even if we're looking at $70 a trip one way, of course mine is a 6 and they may have taken the mark. So we're looking at $64, 52 weeks in a year. That's 10 trips a week. We're looking at $33,000. It'd be a huge savings for people like congressmen, for instance, to relocate to Baltimore instead of DC. Wouldn't that be the case, that we'd actually increase the ridership and a help to the city of Baltimore, which needs help right now with more population?
I don't disagree with your comment that the cost of with regards to the cost of living decreases, but also too, a lot of times the individuals that are able to afford this price point probably also work in the type of jobs where they can just telework from home, to be quite honest with you. What we've seen during this pandemic is the majority of the people who have had to rely on mass transit and public transit have been really our essential workers, those who do not have the luxury to be able to telework from home. And so while, yes, I could certainly see, especially with this age of teleworking, people relocating from DC to Baltimore because the cost of living is cheaper. I think individuals who fall within this price point will still have that luxury to telework and therefore not necessarily need to go back and forth between DC to Baltimore 10 trips a week as you estimated.
Yeah, thank you.
Before I recognize Delegate Wells, I wonder of the sponsor and of the witnesses who testified in favor of maglev, I assume all of you support the Purple Line, correct?
I am supportive of the Purple Line. There was a large apprehension with regards to the Purple Line initially from members of our community when it was first proposed. Those apprehensions were alleviated by a number of concessions that were made, as well as an MOU that was entered into between Prince George's County and Montgomery County as it relates to dealing with possible
let me tell you the reason. Let me tell you the reason I bring this up. The Purple Line delayed for about 25 years by local activists in southern Montgomery County, and they raised the same concerns that opponents of maglev are currently raising about maglev. Those same arguments. I think the only thing that's ever really successfully recycled in Maryland are arguments against transportation projects. And I heard the same things for 25 years and disagreed with them in the case of Montgomery County. I did not want the people from the down county to delay the Purple Line for 25 years, but they did, and it's a financial catastrophe. Anyway, Delegate Wells has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to the sponsors of the bill as well. So my question is kind of to the same effect as the chair. So I guess I'm a little concerned that we're using the pandemic marker of telework as our data point, largely because we don't know it's during the pandemic. So I think that we should be very cautious of that, especially when we are trying to push broader transportation goals around expanding access to MARC. I do understand some of the concerns about us not investing in MARC, but I just think that it's important for us to be very clear that we're not pushing a narrative, to support not seeing the maglev move forward. That would also be to the detriment of investing in transit, because one of the biggest defense of those that don't support transit is that there's not a need for it because of the demand. And then the other thing I would like to say is, because we don't know what the future holds, I almost wonder how we might be cutting off future transit packages, P3s and what have you. And so I don't know if the sponsors have put some thought to that, but I do wonder whether we could be also limiting ourselves from attracting other investors that may perhaps bring a project would be to your liking or to the liking of the majority of those that are opposed to maglev.
Right. Thank you, Delegate Wells, for that question. I really appreciate it. One, as it relates to P3, so the bill is narrowly tailored solely towards magnetic transportation levitation transportation systems. And so it wouldn't preclude any P3 projects from any other type of transportation systems, whether we're talking light rail, whether we're talking regular rail, or some other type of technology. And so I don't want to give the appearance that I'm anti-transit. I mean, I don't think any of my other folks who spoke in support of this bill are anti-transit. Was definitely a proponent, like I mentioned earlier, later on, of the Purple Line, as well as the Red Line project. Unfortunately, that didn't move forward to fruition in Baltimore City. I think investing in transit is extremely important. My whole argument is that I think that we need to prioritize our priorities. And so if we're saying we're going to spend taxpayer dollars, then we need to spend taxpayer dollars in a very thoughtful manner, is what the argument is with this particular bill. And so that means investing more in MTA. That means investing more in Amtrak and other projects that we know are moving forward and will actually benefit the working class people of Maryland. And also too, with regards to the Purple Line, we did see the lawsuits that took place and resulted in billions of dollars, millions of dollars of cost overruns to the state of Maryland because of those lawsuits. And I think if this project goes forward, I don't disagree with the chairman that may potentially happen again. And then who's going to front the bill of those cost overruns when that happens? Are the proponents of this project going to come to the state of Maryland and say, hey, because of these lawsuits, we need you to kick in some dollars? And that's my concern as well. And so I appreciate the chairman's comments with regards to the Purple Line.
And if I could just add, as the council member who has the most Purple Line stops in Prince George's County and along the whole alignment, all of the people here are strong proponents of the Purple Line. And in fact, the same neighborhood that I talked about with all those trucks coming through it is the same neighborhood today under construction for the Purple Line. In fact, the maglev route would go under the Beacon Heights Elementary School, just a few hundreds of blocks actually from a Purple Line station and from where the new maintenance yard is being built for the Purple Line. At the end of the day, I think the decision in front of us is to not get confused between a maglev project and true mass transit that actually grows local economies and provides a service for the masses to move people in the community. At the end of the day, this maglev will provide 3 stops. It will devastate the neighborhoods on either end of those stops, as well as have dramatic effects in between. Consider a 5,000 parking garage in Baltimore City. I mean, why are we proposing a parking garage at that scale? We're proposing it because people will take cars to get on the maglev at the end of the alignment. That is part of how they believe the ridership will work. This is not about creating connectivity between transportation systems or, once again, growing our local economies. So I'm also in this awkward position because I'm as pro-transit as you can get, but this project does not meet the fundamental goals of what real transit needs to be here in the state of Maryland. And thank you again for the time to speak in front of you.
Okay, we will now go to the opponents of the bill. I understand Wayne Rogers isn't here, but Jason Rodriguez, Ian Rainey, and Thurman Jones are here. So let me call on Jason Rodriguez first. Mr. Rodriguez, welcome back to the committee. You have 2 minutes if you're here.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Vice Chair and committee members. As the spokesman of the National Action Network's Greater Baltimore chapter, we are here today to express our organization's strong opposition against HB 63. For those who don't know, the National Action Network is one of the leading civil rights organizations in the nation, with dozens of chapters throughout the United States, founded by Reverend Al Sharpton in 1991. This once-in-a-lifetime project, when connected to organizations like ours and to labor and trade organizations, can help young people build lifelong careers and opportunities. By bringing this type of advanced technology and marrying it with the right training and educational programs, will uplift thousands of local youth into high-paying, fulfilling careers. There's been so much misinformation that's been stated, and I'd be welcome to answer any questions after my testimony. But there's always been a commitment to have the maglev to be at the competitive price of what's currently offered as far as an express service is concerned. The Excella, which is a 40-minute ride, is $44, meaning that the ticket for a maglev is going to be around $44. And instead of a 40-minute ride, it's going to be a 50-minute ride with at least 2 stops, where the Excella Express does not make 2 stops. This is connecting 2 major cities together, Baltimore being the economic engine of the state of Maryland. There's over 2 million plus riders. Teleworking is not an option in the future. Things are going to go back to normal. I know that most folks that have been dealing with business with the federal and state government, with people working at home, realize the inefficiencies and the delays that are going on, especially folks waiting on unemployment. How efficient it is, how inefficient it is with teleworking, and eventually things are going to go back to normal. We already spend billions of dollars.
Or if you could wind up,
Yes.
your testimony, the committee
Yes.
would appreciate it.
Yes, so we already spend billions of dollars in a losing proposition in the Amtrak system since 1970. It's time to move out of the 18th century technology and move into a 21st century technology. The HB
Sir, if you could,
63 is an attempt. I'm closing out. Last paragraph.
Hold. It's got to be the
HB
last
63
sentence, sir, because we have to be on the floor in 40 and 50 minutes.
Yes. So again, HB 63 is an attempt to stop this project from benefiting Marylanders and a stop to job and training programs from becoming available to our community. So we ask the committee to please submit an unfavorable report and give our children a chance for a brighter future. Thank you.
Okay, great. Ian Rainey, 2 minutes. Ian?
Yes, Chair, I'm here.
Okay, you've got 2 minutes. Welcome back to the committee.
Thank you very much, Chair Barve, Vice Chair Stein, and members of the committee. I'm Senior Vice President of Baltimore Washington Rapid Rail and appear today to convey our strong opposition to HB 063. BWR is a railroad franchised by the Maryland Public Service Commission to operate a 311 mile per hour superconducting magnetic levitation train between Washington and Baltimore. When constructed, the train will take passengers between Baltimore and Washington in just 15 minutes. This project will bring significant benefits to the state. It will create 74,000 Maryland jobs and result in $6.5 billion in a GDP increase in Maryland from construction. The project has been undergoing environmental and permitting review by over 30 federal, state, and local agencies for over 4.5 years. The draft environmental impact statement was released on January 15th, 2021 for the public. This milestone begins a 90-day formal comment period. We are committed to ensuring that any issues identified within the draft environmental impact statement or raised during the public comment period are addressed in the best possible way for communities and the environment. HB 063 proposes to prohibit any appropriations from being used by the state or any unit or instrumentality of the state for magnetic levitation systems. No state appropriations, however, have been requested for this project. This bill, therefore, sends a negative signal that the state of Maryland is not willing to pursue remedies to the issues of traffic congestion, poor air quality, and climate change. The region, in fact, faces the worst congestion in the country, and studies show that left unchecked, it will continue to worsen. For these reasons, Baltimore-Washington Rapid Rail strongly opposes HB 063 and urges the committee to submit an unfavorable report. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, let me recognize Thurman Jones. Mr. Jones, are you with us?
A lot of moving pieces, so I don't want to tell you that this thing is done, but I wanted all of you to sort of
is that Mr. Jones? Trish, is that Mr. Jones speaking?
I don't.
Well, yeah, okay. Any questions for
Thurman Jones?
Yeah, I guess Mr. Jones isn't around. So, okay. Well, questions for Mr. Rodriguez and Mr. Rainey. Delegate Harrison.
Thank
Delegate
you.
Harrison?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Rodriguez, I'm sorry, Mr. Rainey. This bill is very narrowly tailored to just indicate that the state would not put up any funds for this. And you mentioned in your testimony that you've not used any, you've not used any funds. And I think you alluded to that you were not going to use funds, state funds. And so I'm trying to understand then how you equate that just because a piece of legislation would say that there would be no state funds expended, that it would say that the state is not interested in expanding transit and reducing traffic along a major corridor. Because this is only talking about, we've heard a whole lot of bills over time as it relates to this particular project. And so a lot of the testimony we heard today, to me, does not even relate to this particular bill. So on this particular bill, all we're talking about is state funds being used for this. And so I'm just trying to understand, why do you think that it would signal that the state is not interested in expanding transit? And I lost you on my screen. I can't see where you are right now.
He's there.
Me now, Delegate?
Mr. Rainey.
Are you able to see me?
Okay, I can hear you. I just don't. It's okay. No, okay, there you are. Okay, I can hear you though. It's fine.
I appreciate the question. I understand that. We've been very clear that we're not going to be seeking state appropriations for this project. I guess what strikes us about this legislation really is kind of the timing and the purpose and what's the intent of it. We've been clear we're not going to be looking for state appropriations. The draft EIS has literally just been released on January 15th. I think most people have not even finished looking at it. And it just makes me wonder why is legislation like this needed? It seems to me that it's intended to send a signal that the state really doesn't support this project or wouldn't support it if it were called upon to offer some kinds of appropriation. And I think at some point in the future, let's envision a hypothetical scenario where the project did come to the state and say, we do need some kind of appropriation. Here's the reason for it. I think at that time, there is absolutely no reason why the legislature and the governor could say no. That's perfectly within their ability to do that. This bill just doesn't seem to achieve anything other than send a message that the state isn't behind this project, and that's why we oppose it.
Well, I guess I can understand your side of it. I think that I disagree with that. I just think that it says that, we're not going to initially extend appropriations. And just like if at some time it's determined that perhaps state assistance is needed, then I believe that that the organization could come back to the state and say, we need assistance. And certainly we could, make a decision from there as to, whether or not we would change the legislation. So.
I apologize, Delegate. The last moment there, your audio seemed to have cut out, but I take your point. I guess we would our position would be, if that's the case, if that discussion would be had in the future, what's the purpose of preemptively passing this type of legislation?
Okay, any other questions for the opponents to the, I have a question for Mr. Rainey, actually. It's not so much a question as an observation. In my opinion, I've always thought of maglev as being more competition with the aircraft industry than with commuter rail. I mean, people who commute along this corridor are probably not going to use maglev. It's mostly, in the future, people who want to catch a show in New York and they want to get up there in an hour. I would think that's the real intention behind maglev. I mean, isn't it?
Actually, Chairman, I think that is part of the, the ridership that we would be looking at. But I really would like to emphasize that this is a train for everyone. Notwithstanding some of the comments about our fare structure, the reality is that there are going to be price points for tickets for this train that suit every type of traveler. In the draft EIS, it's very clear that you could buy a ticket for as little as $27. Well, that's much less than Amtrak. It is more than MARC, but as some speaker previously pointed out, MARC is subsidized. So, it really is going to depend on the purpose of travel, the time of travel. If you're a business traveler and you buy your ticket 5 minutes before your maglev train leaves the station, and you're traveling during the height of rush hour, you might pay quite a bit for that ticket. But if you're a commuter who's traveling off the peak hour, or if you're someone who has the foresight to buy a ticket ahead of time, you certainly won't pay that high fare. So I think the point is this is a train for all travelers, not just the wealthy, and the ticket fare structure will be designed accordingly.
Mr. Rodriguez, did you want to say something? I lowered the hand you put up there.
I just wanted to add to what he was saying. I think that what Delegate Wells pointed out about cutting off our future, I know that in previous conversations from the former mayor of Baltimore City, Stephanie Rolland Blake, we were looking at soliciting the Olympic Committee and bringing the Olympics, the Summer Games, to the region. I think that this puts us in a very competitive position, having a maglev system, and that was one of the discussions that was actually brought up in the committee, the Olympic Committee oversight, when they were looking at possibly a joint games between DC and Baltimore. I think that, again, this type of bill may cut us off in the future of this type of technology, and bringing in possibly the Summer Games that could potentially bring hundreds of millions of dollars of economic opportunity to the Northeast corridor.
Okay, and with that, I think you have the last word for the bill. That will conclude the public hearing on House Bill 63. Thank you to everyone. Let me now proceed to House Bill 67, Delegate Corman. 4 minutes, Mr. Chairman.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. I come before you today with the Maryland Department of Transportation Promises Act of 2021, HB 67. This legislation was passed, very similar posture last year by your committee and the full House. We made some changes just to adjust for the fact that it's a year later, and so the process has continued. I just want to be clear, if you want to kill the I-495, I-270 project, this bill is not for you. If you want to reform the entire P3 process in the state of Maryland, this bill is not for you. All this bill does is codify the promises that the Maryland Department of Transportation has made to your committee, to the Board of Public Works, to the public about the project. This is not how I would do the project. This is how they say they would do the project. And you have in your testimony, as you did last year, a citation for every promise in this bill from the Secretary of Transportation made to the Board of Public Works and to your committee. And I should add that since that time, they've added a whole bunch of new promises that are not captured in this bill, although I hope if you move this bill, you'll amend them in. Those are promises that were attached to their announcement of the locally preferred alternative that I also submitted in the testimony to you. I'm confounded by the opposition testimony I saw in the record, including what was phrased a statement of information by the Department of Transportation. If they believe these promises are inaccurately stated, I would invite them to meet with me or the members of your committee, if you're willing to move the legislation forward, to explain how to make this consistent with the promises, the public promises, not secret backroom deals that they made about this project. Why do we need this bill if they've made these public promises? Because last year, sitting in your committee, the chairman was kind enough to let me ask Secretary Slater some questions. One of those questions was, there will be no contract submitted to the Board of Public Works before of the final award until the EIS is complete. Secretary Slater replied, yes. Well, the EIS is not complete, and we've already been told a Board of Public Works agreement will be submitted later this spring. So we need this legislation to hold them to account for the promises that they have made. And that's all this legislation does. It codifies what they have already agreed to. Thank you for moving the bill last year. I'd ask for a favorable report again this year.
Okay, we have a number of people who've signed up in favor. I'm going to call on them for 2 minutes each, and then we'll entertain questions of the sponsor and of the favorable witnesses. And those would be in this order: Brad Sherman, Josh Tolkien, Mark Pershala, and Ross Capon, and then Janet Gallant also. So first, Brad Sherman with Josh Tolkien on deck. Brad, you might need to unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me?
I can hear and see you.
Oh, great. Thank you, Chairman Barve, Vice Chairman Stein, members of the committee. My name is Brad Sherman. I'm co-chair of Citizens Against Beltway Expansion. Thank you for allowing us to express our support for House Bill 67, even though it does not stop this project. We believe this bill is needed because the state does keep breaking its public promises for the $11 billion public-private I-495, I-270 tollway expansion, as Delegate Corman illustrated. The promise for no net taxpayer costs, for example, was undercut last year when the draft environmental impact statement revealed a state subsidy of at least $428 million would be needed, and this estimate does not include the billions that Marylanders will undoubtedly pay to move utilities and upgrade suburban Maryland stormwater systems to manage the runoff we can expect 550 acres of proposed new road surface to pour onto our neighborhoods and parks. It also does not account for the risk of unbudgeted liabilities, such as we've seen with the Purple Line. As you also know, and as has been just said, MDOT is on track to break its promise to your committee not to send developer contracts to the Board of Public Works before releasing the final environmental impact statement clarifying the proposal's costs and liabilities to taxpayers and the community. This is wrong. We have a right to know this information. We have a right to know what we are being sold. The promises to share traffic and revenue data with local agencies and set aside 10% of toll revenues for Montgomery and Prince George's transit projects are also being walked back. This unfortunate track record does not inspire confidence that MDOT will keep other promises, like ensuring construction workers are paid union scale, which have been made over the last 2 or 3 years to win support for this controversial expansion program. Given this proposal's size, cost, and potential for long-term risk to taxpayers and our communities, Marylanders at least must hold the state to its promises for this project. We therefore urge the committee strongly to report HB 67 favorably and quickly. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is Josh Tolkien there?
Good afternoon.
There
my
you
name is
are.
Josh Tolkien. I'm
And you're
the
not a
director.
cat.
I am not a cat. I was earlier, but I'm not right now. I'm the director of the Maryland chapter of the Sierra Club. On behalf of our 70,000 members and supporters in the state of Maryland, we urge a favorable report. The Sierra Club serves a public good. We organize over 70,000 people to engage in the public process, from testifying reviewing, researching, offering comments on regulatory policy, the National Environmental Policy Act review. And we do that based on a dialogue with the administration and the legislature. When there is a sense that the public is not actually being told accurate information, or that information is not something they will stick to, you have an erosion of public confidence, you have an inefficiency of the engagement of civil society and research organizations. We have seen repeated promises made to the public around this project that there is no longer a commitment to, or we're seeing a reversal on. And that is very, very dangerous in eroding public confidence and the effectiveness of engagement. This bill codifies several incredibly important promises that were made both to the public as well as to local government. The commitment to not move forward in a final contract before the final environmental impact statement is complete. There are a variety of other commitments that we believe are critical. As Delegate Corman said, this is not going to stop this project. We recognize that, but for both the effectiveness of this project as well as just ongoing relationship between the public and public organizations and the administration, it's very important that these bold promises that were actually made to the public are codified and that they're kept. And we believe that passing this bill is a prudent way to hold accountable the promises that were made and ensure that we're can maintain public confidence in what we're hearing from our elected officials. We urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Josh. Next, let me recognize Rockville City Council member Mark Pershela. Mark, welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Chairman Barve. My name is Mark Pershela. I'm a member of the Rockville City Council, and this testimony has been approved by the Mayor and Council of Rockville. We thank Delegate Corman for his leadership to bring this critical legislation forward. The city of Rockville would be the municipality most impacted by the I-270 and I-495 public-private partnership project. Yet we were blindsided by the announcement of this project, and we're not included as a partner with MDOT and SHA, as were Gaithersburg and the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission. We have closely followed the P3 process as it has unfolded so far, and our support for HB 67 is based on our experiences. We highlight the following key points. We urge clarity on the promise of the administration that no taxpayer dollars would be required for this project to include dollars that municipalities and counties would have to spend to mitigate traffic, noise, pollution, stormwater, and other P3 impacts. We support the bill for its transparency and process provisions. For example, the state has not shared underlying traffic data even with the partners it has. We support HB 7067 because it properly orders a sequence of approvals and prohibits the Board of Public Works from making decisions before it has all the pertinent facts. The requirement which prohibits MDOT from submitting a contract to the Board of Public Works unless it completes the NEPA is essential for the protection of our community. We agree with the bill's support of transit alternatives. HB 67 will help to mitigate the impacts of this massive P3 infrastructure project on our community and increases the transparency and supports transit alternatives. For these reasons, we urge this committee to provide HB 67 with a favorable report and quickly advance it to the House for a vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Council Member. Next, Ross Capon, followed by Janet Gallant.
Chairman Barv and committee members, thank you very much for this opportunity. I strongly support House Bill 67 to make sure that as others have said, make sure that the state's commitments are held. P3s are not a funding panacea. Scholars have repeatedly said that P3 construction ultimately is paid for by some combination of taxpayer dollars and tolls. There is considerable skepticism, particularly after the November election, that the toll lanes project will survive environmental review under the Biden administration, which takes environmental laws much more seriously. Climate change is partly driven by Maryland and US overemphasis on private motor vehicles. It's now considered to be a cause of the spread of disease, including even the current pandemic, according to a new study published in the journal Science of the Total Environment. Investments that would expand reliance on private vehicles are at cross purposes with our health. This project will not noticeably reduce congestion, except on the toll lanes for those willing to pay the very high tolls the concessionaire would need to charge. It will burden taxpayers. As a frequent user of the Beltway and 270, I am conscious of the huge burden it would be to live through the lengthy construction. Moreover, to the extent this expansion encourages more private vehicle travel, it raises the possibility that the state will once again ask for more lanes, as they did very soon after 1999, when Robert McGarry said, "I just didn't in my wildest dreams think that it would fill up that quickly." I think I've used up my 2 minutes, but I urge a favorable report on this bill.
Well, you get brownie points for acknowledging that when I failed to notice. So in any case, thanks, Ross. And Janet, you're up next, and then we'll go to questions. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you. I'm Janet Gallant with don'twiden270.org. We strongly support HB 67, the MDOT Promises Act. The toll lane project is an ongoing story of false promises made to officials and the public. When the governor first announced the project, he told us, and these are exact quotes, "It won't cost us tax dollars." P3s dramatically decrease the cost to taxpayers. Only the new lanes would have tolls. The old ones without tolls, would remain free. And we don't need any legislation. We'll have to go through difficult federal environmental approvals. The Hogan administration broke every one of those promises and many more. MDOT's own documents show that hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars will go to subsidize the private contractor. MDOT's preferred alternative turns two existing free lanes paid for by taxpayers into toll lanes that profit the private contractor. The state is doing an end run around the federal environmental review. MDOT will seek approval for a 50-year agreement with the private contractor before the environmental review for Phase 1 South is finished and before the environmental review for Phase 1 North is even scheduled. At the MDOT Roadshow in October, Chair Barve wisely reminded Secretary Slater, "Our primary responsibility is to find solutions that work for the taxpayers of Maryland. Please favorably report HB 67 as quickly as possible. The bill is absolutely necessary. It holds the Hogan administration accountable. It will ensure that at least to some extent, this project works less for the benefit of private contractors and more for the benefit of the public." Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions for the sponsor and the witnesses in favor of the bill? Well, I don't see any questions. You've escaped once again, Mr. Corman, unscathed, as often you do. In any case, all right, thank you very much. All the opposition to the bill is written and not oral, and for that reason, that concludes the public hearing on House Bill 67. Finally, House Bill 334, Delegate Corman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I come forward with House Bill 334, the Zero Emission Bus Transition Act. This is, I believe, except for 1 year changing, identical to legislation that was passed by your committee and the full House on a bipartisan basis last year. It simply requires that after FY23, fiscal year 23, MDOT's purchases for the Baltimore City municipal bus fleet, which is about 750 buses and a few other long-haul buses that the state maintains, be zero emission. We have taken previously and are happy to take again very constructive amendments from MDOT and the Maryland Transit Administration to help them meet this goal. This will still be a transition. This won't be a snap your fingers, and we won't have polluting buses anymore. But over time, this will allow us to phase in a zero emission bus fleet. I don't think there's any opposition to this bill, so I won't go on further except to say I know the provisions of this bill.
One person has written opposition. Forgive me for interrupting you. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, since there's no oral opposition, and I'll take a look at that opposition and try to address it in writing to you, Mr. Chairman, I'll just say the vice chair of this committee has very important legislation, the Climate Solutions Act, which basically contains the contents of this bill. I've spoken to the vice chair. I would encourage him to incorporate amendments that I've submitted previously and have shared with him offline regarding some issues MTA had, as well as some issues the labor force had but would encourage you to move his much more comprehensive, important bill over this one, certainly. But appreciate the committee's support last year and going forward on the issue. And thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, let me go through all the witnesses who are signed up to testifying in favor, and they are Nishith Khanna, Elizabeth Bunn, Ramon, well, let's just start with Nishith Khanna with Elizabeth Bunn on deck. Nishith? I hate it when people who are Indian American don't show up since I know how to pronounce their names so well. Okay, Elizabeth Bunn with Ramon Placia Calvo after.
Thank you and good afternoon.
Elizabeth?
Yep, I'm ready. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
You got 2
Okay.
minutes.
Thank you.
Yes, I can even see the top of your head. So
Okay, I can't tell because of the way
minutes.
that, is that better? Okay.
There you
Good
go. Yeah,
afternoon.
much better. Okay.
My name is Elizabeth Bunn and I'm the Maryland State Director for the Labor Network for Sustainability. Our mission is to engage workers and communities in forging a transition that is ecologically sustainable and economically just. Thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of a favorable report of House Bill 334. We face daunting interrelated crises, public health, climate, and economic. The task of tackling these is made all the more challenging by budgetary constraints caused by the pandemic. This bill takes an important step in addressing all of these in a fiscally prudent manner. The immediate fiscal footprint is minimal because its effective start date is 2023. ZEV buses are already cheaper over their lifespan, so long-term fiscal impact is positive, and that will improve over time as ZEV costs continue to go down. Transitioning away from diesel buses will reduce emissions and will likely increase ridership on buses because they're such a more pleasant experience. ZEV buses are also a public health imperative because they eliminate other toxic pollutants from diesel buses. The bill protects workers who operate and maintain MTA's fleet. It guarantees equivalent job opportunities to any who might be displaced. This is a wonderful model for how we should be approaching all climate policies. One final note, Maryland should work to leverage economic opportunities as part of its climate strategy. Other jurisdictions who have required the purchase of ZEV buses, like LA, have developed procurement policies that incentivize for local quality job creation. Maryland should do the same. We urge a favorable report and thank you again.
Thank you. Next up, Ramon Palancia Calvo, followed by Josh Tolkien. Ramon.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, Ramon Palencia Calvo, Deputy Director of the Maryland League of Conservation Voters. Thank you for this opportunity. House Bill 334 is a priority for Maryland LCV and the environmental community. Maryland LCV works at the intersection of climate change mitigation and equity, and this bill addresses both. This is a bill for climate and for public health. Transportation is the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in Maryland, and unless we address this source of emissions, we won't be able to tackle climate change. Right now, we have the technology to address this problem. There are well over 1,000 electric buses operating throughout the country, and they are saving thousands of dollars per bus per year. This is money that transit systems can put back into their fleets to keep them well maintained and safely running. Electric buses reduce overall carbon emissions and eliminate harmful diesel emissions that cause adverse health effects, including long-term damage to lung development in children. If we look at the current state of technology, electric buses from top makers operating in the US yield between 225 to 300 plus miles per charge, and batteries can be fully charged in just a few hours, 2 to 3 hours in most cases. Furthermore, overhead fast charging infrastructure along the routes allow buses to recharge during route stops, increasing their mileage throughout the day. So it is important to mention that although technology will certainly continue to advance, the current state of battery and recharging technology already allowed for a gradual and reliable transition to a zero-emission bus fleet. Finally, I would like to point out that this bill will allow MTA to continue deploying their buses statewide in case of emergencies and for special events. The future of electric buses is now, and Maryland needs to commit to electrifying its bus fleet immediately. For those reasons, Maryland Eco Conservation voters strongly urges a favorable report on this priority bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Josh Tulkin, once again, not a cat.
Good afternoon again, members of the committee. My name is Josh Tulkin. On behalf of the Sierra Club and our 70,000 members and supporters in the state of Maryland, we urge a favorable report. As there is no opposition and it's Friday afternoon, I'll keep my comments very brief. The technology is here. This bill sets in motion the right procedure to shift to electric buses through our existing procurement contract systems and schedules, and puts us on track to make this conversion in an economic way. We strongly support the just transition provisions, which provide both training, recognition, and accommodation if any job losses arise. And we believe that targeting programs like this towards the most vulnerable populations, children who are literally at tailpipe height, is a critical way to be prioritizing our climate policy. We support this bill. We urge a favorable report. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. Lauren Brown and Linda Boyd. Lauren Brown, are you, well, we'll take Linda and look for Lauren. Linda, I see you right there.
Thank you. Thank you, chairs. Thank you, vice chairs of the Environmental Transportation and Appropriations Committee. My name is Linda Boyd, and I'm here on behalf of Green Grace, which is the environmental arm of the Maryland Episcopal Diocese. I won't echo the comments made in support of this bill. We strongly support this bill as our continuing our duty to protect God's creation. However, one problem we have with the bill is section A415. Now, I'm not a scientist. The last chemistry I had was in high school, so that tells you it wasn't just yesterday. But this is what I've learned, that 415 defines a zero emission vehicle as being powered entirely by electricity produced by combining hydrogen and oxygen that runs the motor. 95% of the oxygen produced in the United States is made from methane or fossil fuels, i.e. natural gas. This is also known as gray or blue hydrogen. This is confirmed by the US Department of Energy. This results in the release of carbon dioxide, a greenhouse gas, into the atmosphere and furthers our climate crisis. However, green hydrogen produced through the electrolysis process using renewable energy is what we support. The electrolysis process of hydrogen production uses electricity, uses batteries. When that electricity is produced through renewable sources such as solar or wind, you can have net zero carbon emissions. Our second reason is that battery supported powered vehicles have are more economical and far less expensive for the infrastructure. And as amended, we respectfully request a favorable vote. Does anyone have any questions?
Well, Linda, I'm not going to take questions yet. I understand Nishit Khanna has shown up, but before I recognize him, you'll be happy to know, Linda, that a couple of years ago, we passed a provision in the law that prohibits the consideration of hydrogen produced by the steam reforming of methane as compliant with our zero emissions laws. So your concern, I believe, is already taken by our committee. I actually stood up on the House floor and gave a little chemistry dissertation. So in any case, let's go to Nishit Khanna, and then if Lauren is around, we'll recognize her, and then we'll take questions for everybody. So Nishit.
Hello, my name is Nishant Khanna, and I'm a
Sorry, I screwed up your name, and I'm Indian.
No worries. That was a good effort, and better than I get a lot of times. So no worries about that. My name is Nishant, and I'm a neuroradiology physician employed by Johns Hopkins and a board member of the Chesapeake Physicians for Social Responsibility. I'm here today in support of HB 0334 out of a deep concern for the health and well-being of Marylanders. Diesel fuel emissions from internal combustion engines like those used in our MTA buses pose a significant health risk to our communities. Diesel fuel in particular is the most damaging of all vehicle emissions to our respiratory systems. This is in part because it contains the highest concentration of ultrafine particles, which allow it to achieve deeper penetration into our respiratory airways. Ultimately, that allows the emissions from diesel fuel to enter our circulation with greater efficiency than other forms of gasoline emissions, including unleaded gasoline. The emissions from diesel fuel contain at least 40 substances known to cause negative health impacts in humans, including nitrogen oxides, benzene, formaldehyde, and heavy metals. In 2012, the WHO categorized diesel emissions as a known human carcinogen. Diesel emissions have also been shown to both cause and exacerbate a variety of respiratory diseases in humans, including asthma, the respiratory diseases that vehicle emissions can cause, and the air pollution to which vehicle emissions make a substantial contribution have both also been implicated in increased morbidity and mortality related to COVID-19. In addition to the direct impact on our health, vehicle emissions from our transportation sector are also the single largest contributor to greenhouse gas emissions that drive climate change, and that poses an existential threat to humanity. As the scientific and medical community continue to learn more about the deleterious effects of diesel vehicle emissions on our health and its contribution to climate change, the urgency with which we need to transition to zero emission vehicles becomes clear. As a physician and board member of the Chesapeake Physicians for Social Responsibility, I urge a favorable report and thank you for your time.
Well, I won't hold it against you that you're a doctor. It's because of guys like you. When I was growing up, my parents would say, Kumar, why aren't you becoming a doctor like Nishant or Jay Jalisi? Okay. Is Lauren Brown around? Nope. Okay, we'll go to questions. Any questions for the sponsor or any of these witnesses who I have verbally abused during the course of this public hearing? Any questions? No. Oh, Delegate Holmes has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just wondering if this bill were to pass, would you be discussing the equations of stoichiometry for the enjoyment and pure humor for the full floor sessions, Mr. Chair?
No, Marvin, that's always your job on the floor of the House. Okay, any other questions? Delegate Love? Any other questions? Okay, so I think that's it for this bill. The opponents there's only one opponent and she's offered written testimony, so I can count on Delegate Corman to give me his scathing written rebuttal in a short order. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to conclude the public hearing on House Bill 334. It means we don't have any public hearings to do after the floor session, which is going to be in another 15 minutes. So you people did some really great quick work. So thank you all to everybody who testified and to everybody on the committee. And Trish, do you have any announcements of any kind, or does anybody else have any announcements for the good of the body, subcommittee chairs? Anybody? Nope. Okay, in that case, we are adjourned. Have a good weekend. Behave yourselves.